Hello and welcome to another Friday Facebook Live. Fridays seem to come around quicker and quicker at the moment. So thank you very much for joining us. This week we have a Facebook Live session that is called The Legal Implications of Post-Lockdown. I was just saying just before we came live that we should probably think of snappier titles for these because they're not all that exciting. But anyway, what we are looking at today is businesses and how businesses need to change and in order to cope, and if there are any legal implications that businesses might need to consider as we come out of lockdown. Obviously, things are relaxing now. A lot of businesses opened at the start of last week. We've got the last kind of tranche of businesses in terms of beauty salons and stuff opening up from the 4th of July. But the world has changed. We've now got loads of new regulations that businesses need to look at in order to keep themselves compliant from a social distancing point of view, from an employee contracts point of view. And so today we're just going to focus on maybe some of the legal things here. Now, we are not a team of lawyers. I will say that first off. Joanne is a lawyer, but not an expert in employment law. So we are not the go-to answer here. We're just going to have a general discussion about our experiences and see if we can point businesses in the right direction. So first of all, I will go around and ask you who you are and what business you work for, and then I will come around again and we'll talk about your personal circumstances and how your business is coping. So Helen, I'm going to come to you first. What's your name and where do you come from?
I'm Helen Christie. I'm a HR consultant and I work under a franchise called Face to Face HR, so I cover the northwest region of England. So I work with small businesses providing HR support.
Brilliant, thank you. Hannah?
I'm Hannah, I'm a director at GrowTraffic and I'm here to give the business perspective.
Brilliant. And Joanne?
I'm a solicitor with various solicitors and I specialise in wills, probate, powers of attorney and residential conveyancing.
Thank you very much, all of you. So, as I said, we're obviously Joanne's a lawyer, the rest of us are not lawyers, but we are all running our own business. And Helen, obviously, as a HR professional, deals with businesses and employment contracts and employment law quite a lot of the time. So I'm going to come around again, please. This time I would like to know, what circumstances do you find yourself in? So how is your business coping? How are you reacting? And how are you responding to the changes that are needed? Helen, again, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I mean, just from a personal point of view, I didn't kind of see the dip in business that lots of people did because of the nature of what I do, really. So I actually went berserk when all the kind of job retention scheme and further constant changing of that came in. But from a practical point of view, obviously I'm a consultant, so as much as I try, my business is called Face to Face, obviously that side of it had to stop. So I've been doing lots of Zoom meetings, I've been working from home, I'm back in the office now, as you can see, but it's just been a kind of bit of a transition really in terms of managing some of the stuff that I would normally do face to face, in fact disciplinaries, grievances, that kind of stuff, which is a little bit awkward to do on Zoom. Finding ways around that, doing things like redundancy consultations over Zoom. It's not very personable really. I'm not enjoying it, but it's got to happen that way at the moment. So really, it's just finding new ways of doing things.
Yeah, how are your customers coping? Are they quite open to doing things like that over Zoom, or are they resistant?
Yeah, some of them are, some of them aren't. One of my biggest clients is a kind of warehousing, so most of their staff are back at work now, so actually they want me there, they want me on site, and so I have started to do site visits from kind of last week. I'm fine with it. Other people seem to not understand what 2 meters is. That's just a kind of just a recognition that people are kind of wanting, haven't seen you for 3 months, and they come running towards you. Are you all right? And it's just, can you stop over there, please?
I went into Bake-Up the other day because I live in Bake-Up, and I said, I took Leon with me. We had to go to a couple of shops, so we had our masks on, and nobody else seemed to. It was like coronavirus had gone. Nobody was following the 2 meter rules.
Yeah.
The shopkeepers were obviously doing their best to provide the things that they should have. The sanitizer, and there was tape on the floor, but the general public. Yeah. 2 meters had gone out the window.
I know.
I know. The second meeting kind of later on in the week, and I got there and they were kind of one way in the building, one way out the building. We were sat at the four corners of the room. They had hand sanitizer on the table, so they were really geared up for it, and they came in for the meeting and went home again afterwards. So that, you know, it just depends on the business, really, I think.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. Yeah, Hannah, you were going to say something anyway, but I'll come to you next.
Same question. Yeah. So we were kind of on the, I suppose, the receiving end of all the changes that were being made to businesses and the economy and stuff. So we furloughed most of our staff very quickly. And that furlough scheme has been a real benefit to us. Like, as a business, we've really benefited from it, and it's allowed us to, you know, get back up to where we were and start to bring people back. But it was incredibly difficult navigating it, really, because I felt like we were making decisions based on half pieces of information, like not the full story. And as time has gone on, particularly with the furlough scheme, more information has been released, and you know, you kind of have to adapt to like the changes that are being put upon you. But that's not to say it's not been a good scheme. You know, we have benefited from it and appreciate it. In terms of social distancing, we all work from home anyway, really. So it's been all right. We've not had to make any changes to that. And obviously, there's only been a couple of us working for the majority of the time, and we work remotely from each other. Rachel and I work remotely from each other anyway. So that's been the same. All our meetings are still online, and I think probably will be online for a lot longer. I'm reasonably heavily pregnant, so I'm not going anywhere anytime soon to meet people and, you know, subject people to that monstrosity. So me waddling towards people, is not what they want. So yeah, so for us, it's been, you know, we've had to be agile, but we've not minded it so much because the changes have been supportive. We took advantage of the VAT deferral, so that was really good as well. So yeah, it's not been too bad for us, I don't think.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And Joanne, how about you?
A massive roller coaster ride. Like Hannah said, it's been a process of navigation, and suddenly we're all asked to be accountants effectively to work out this furlough scheme, and it's just going to get worse when you start implementing it, coming back from part-time working. We saw changes happening sort of everywhere within the field. One of the USPs that we have at Berries is our ability to go and visit clients. So I deal with people with Alzheimer's, dementia, family members like that you wouldn't necessarily drag them out to an office to see sort of a pinstripe solicitor. That went out the window quite quickly. I wasn't able to give my normal client care that I would normally do. You can't expect somebody in their 80s to try and go on Zoom. So that was quite difficult for that in that respect. And then we had our biggest problem with the legalities was witnessing, which we discussed a bit last time, is that you can't witness legal documents on Zoom. You can verify ID on Zoom, which again will come to an end as soon as lockdown sort of releases properly. That was something that was instilled, but we got no guidance from our own bodies in terms of how to get a will witnessed properly when you couldn't be near people. So it was kind of car boot through the window, that kind of issue. For us, we were geared up to work from home, which is quite unusual for solicitors because, as you guys probably have, especially Rachel and Hannah, your stuff is online anyway, whereas myself definitely has quite big legal folders of stuff you need to do. So asking somebody to work from home, it's a bit more than, can you make sure that you've got the right antivirus on your computer? We have to make preparations for people's physical legal documents to be kept purely while that's there, and that's quite difficult to do. So that's hard to navigate that. And then so you need the girls back in the office ASAP. Can't welcome clients in yet. Have staff that are shielded, so we don't even know when they can come back to work, and needing them. And it's been really extra difficult for us to be able to do. And then you get all that in place, and of course one of our biggest areas is residential conveyancing, and of course the market doesn't move. So you spend all the time getting everything ready. You think, thank God, we're ready to, without disruption to a client, and then they can't get a mortgage anywhere. So,
yeah. I've got a friend who's a solicitor in Bacup, and I was talking to her last night, and there's the things that you don't think about. So she's reopening this week. She's back in her office this week for the first time, and she was saying it's things like paper. You know, she's set up the screens, she's set up the hand sanitizer, she's put a desk in front of her reception, a front door, so that people can't just walk into the office; they have to stop there. But you know, like we're fairly paperless. We more or less run a paperless office now, and we're quite strict about that. But you're dealing with contracts and wills and ID, and you know, like you say, there's only so much of that you can do remotely or do online. A lot of it is just pieces of paper you're passing across the desk to people, isn't it?
It was even practicality's point of view. So at the beginning, when everybody went home straight away, but we had to carry on going, the post needed to be, when we send out a lot of posts, and it's quite thick stuff as well, so you need it to be franked. There's loads of printing that needs to be done, and whilst girls don't have industrial printers at home, and the ink cartridges are expensive and that kind of thing, and it was kind of, and may I swear, I was kind of everybody's printing bitch, director, and we ended up doing the job. 2 people, including the director, are doing the job that only one person's getting paid to do.
Yeah.
We needed that facility of coming in with printers, and you can put what measures you want in here, and we have the girls coming back, but I've still only got 2 printers. And measures are only as good as what people are adhering to them anyway, so I can put as many lines on the floor as I possibly want to do, but they're only as good. Like Rachel said, you go into for the first time to Iceland, and I don't know, I'd been kind of just working from home and then going to the thing. And you can queue up behind people 2 meters, but at the end of the day, you've got the freezers that are open. Like, well, it don't matter about spending 2 meters away from them when it takes 15 minutes for be in their company, when I've just touched the same slidey thing.
Yeah.
So then trying to implement that in the workplace is just, it's.
And it's human nature, isn't it, that we forget we are not able to be mindful of that level of security. You know, I think if you're a nurse or you're a doctor and you work in controlled environments, you're a scientist or whatever, then you are used to behaving like that, but they get trained into it after years. We're just not used to it. You know, as I say, Leon and I went in with our mask, but I was still bloody touching everything. I had hay fever because it's summer, so I was pulling my mask down and scratching my nose and putting my mask back up. And I, you know, even as I'm doing it, I'm not supposed to be wearing this bloody mask.
Yeah.
You know, it's human nature, isn't it? That we're not used to behaving like that. So it's hard.
I think as well, like the more we do it, the more complacent we become in a way. Like it's not habitual yet. And because like, you know, there's more freedom and it's not in the news as much. It doesn't feel like you're being smacked around the face with it quite as much. It's easy to become a little bit complacent. Like I went to TK Maxx with my friend the other day. We were just accidentally getting really close to each other and forgetting, and you know, then having to jump apart. And yesterday I went to the supermarket and there was a man in a Tesco's uniform in Tesco's that was just doing his normal shop, but like getting really close to people. And I thought, I bet through this whole thing he's just spent all his time in really close proximity with people, not having to social distance, so he's just not thinking about it. Like I think it's easy, isn't it, to forget.
Yeah.
And the risks are there, but then
it's like, you know, I've got horses, and you learn from the beginning that you have horses. You know, don't walk behind the horses, don't stand underneath the horses. But I've been around horses all my life, and I walk straight around the back and I crawl underneath them because I've not been kicked. And that's the thing, you know, if he'd caught coronavirus, or if he'd had somebody who had it and a close relative died, it would be front of mind. It would be, like you said, it's that complacency because it's not whacked us around the head, has it? So it is.
I do think, like, bringing it back to the title, I think that there is a potential perhaps for like people to become litigious over this. So, you know, you got really close to me at work and you had it and you've given it to me and now I'm going to sue you. Like, you can see that that's something that people will perhaps potentially go down, or suing their employers for not adequately protecting them.
So this is a thing that I wanted to ask, actually, because I was just saying before we came live that I was at a meeting with Rossendale Borough Council a couple of weeks ago, and I'm the chair of the local business association, so I was there on behalf of that, and it was a meeting with business owners to talk about the reopening and what they needed to do. And there were a lot of business owners there who were asking questions like, you know, if this tracing app comes in and we get a phone call to say one of our customers who's been in the shop has got coronavirus, how long do we need to shut for? What measures do we need to go to make sure we've spring cleaned? You know, and they wanted really clear legal guidelines to say, this is the rule, this is what you need to do. And the council, through no fault of their own, were basically saying, there is no hard and fast rule about this. There's no guidance. You know, you've just got to do what you feel is best because there's no law about it. Yeah. But as Hannah says, as a business owner, then you are concerned. Well, what if people get litigious about this after the fact? What if there suddenly become a lot of cases of claiming from employers or shopkeepers or, you know, business owners or whatever because they haven't taken the precautions? I know none of us have got answers about this, but Joanne, what do you think from a lawyer perspective? Do you think that might happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's a blame society as it is at the end of the day. But like we just said, I think there is no law, so that everything is just guidance. It's really going to be quite hard for people to prove that their employer has broken the law when there is no law in place. They are guidelines, and that is all they are at this point, and you've got to follow it. Boris is always on about common sense point of view, so if that's the guidance out of the Prime Minister's mouth, it can be hard to interpret that so that an employer's broken hard and fast rules. But also, the law's concerned, I'm sure that you'll agree, is it's concerned with the burden of proof at the end of the day. How the hell are you going to prove that it was caught from work when they've been, like I said, if I came in and I wasn't the director, you know, I'm coming in and saying, oh, I've got it from such a body at work. I don't know that.
Yeah.
Because somebody's tested positive at work doesn't mean I got it from them when I went to Iceland and touched the same slidey things as everybody else, and that would be a big problem, is the burden of proof, and absolutely nail it on, that is where you got it from.
Yeah.
People anyway, so you can say that I got it from that person because they were tested positive, but I don't know that somebody else I've come into contact with who's asymptomatic, I could have got it from them.
Yeah. And I wonder what the implications are then of the of the contact tracers. So if, for example, then I had a phone call saying somebody at my work or whatever had tested positive, you might have it, and then I became ill with it. Is there any grounds to say, oh, it's proven because the contact tracers rang me and therefore supported it? Or could you say?
You always think, like, a defence at the end of the day is that, I mean, again, I'm not an authority, it's not my area of specialism whatsoever, and just taking heed from when I used to be representing in the magistrates court, it was, like I say, it was all about the burden of proof. You've got it, prove that I gave it to you. It's a personal injury, prove that beyond the balance of probabilities, or beyond reasonable doubt, depending on if it's criminal or civil, that actually happened. And absolutely, we'll be using that contact track and trace app straight away, but even that's under scrutiny now.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody knows whether that's going to work or come in or anything now. They're saying it might not even be ready for a year, mightn't they? But
I think it's not going to work if somebody's going to, you know, if COVID was going to give us an illness that I gave you a big purple spot on the side of your face and thought, you've got it, that's definitely giving it to me. Otherwise, nobody has a clue. Not being tested, could be anything.
Well, this is the thing, I think people worry about it because they hear about cases, you know, where they've, say if it was like somebody working for a chemicals company and they got some sort of cancer and then they prove it, but that, like you say, there's a burden of, there's a cause and an effect there, isn't there, that you can prove, because not if everybody had cancer, which then you wouldn't be able to prove it, would you? But you've been able to make a case that on the balance of probability. Whereas with this, there are so many, you know, it's like the flu, isn't it? Obviously, it's everybody has either got it or carrying it or had it or whatever. The chances of being able to pin down where you got it from are just phenomenal.
Sorry.
No, sorry, go on.
I wonder then if there's a chance of people taking their employers to tribunals for failing to protect them. What do you think, Helen?
I think it's a health and safety issue, really. There's already legislation in place that would cover it, and it's the duty of care under the health and safety legislation that would be relevant. But I think that what I've been advising employers is use the risk assessments that the government have put in place. They've given really clear, good guidance in very specific industry-related kind of pockets of information. Using asking somebody who's a health and safety professional to give you an example of a good risk assessment is always helpful as well. Somebody that I know gave me one, and I've used and said I could share it with my clients, and I have done, and they've used that. But by the same token, I've had employees coming to me saying, well, for example, in the warehouse that I referred to earlier, I've been picking. We've got 2 metre markings everywhere, but other pickers are coming over the top of me and picking stuff. And I said, well, you've got responsibility as well to tell them to back them off, because you can't. The employer isn't responsible for every individual's lack of following what their guidance is. So I think from an employer point of view, as long as you can demonstrate that you've done all the 2 metre stuff, you've given them hand sanitizer, you've provided PPE where it's relevant, you've told them what to do if they can't be a metre apart, you've briefed them, you've repeated the brief over and over again where people have flagged that it's not working. But then you've also got to look at, I think we were talking before we came live, that people are just ignoring stuff, aren't they? So one of the employees that had come to me complaining about not being able to be 2 metres, I said, well, you went outside and got in a car with 4 other lads to go for your lunch. Where was it now? So you've got, it works both ways, doesn't it? So I think if as long as employers are confident that they're doing everything they possibly can, then they would have a defence against that, because the health and safety legislation is where you just, you can't demonstrate that you've protected somebody's health. You're doing something willfully that's going to damage their health and safety. So asking them to do something that would put them at unreasonable risk, which, as Joanne's just said, you could go to Iceland and touch a freezer and get it the same way.
Yeah, I think Helen's raised, like the health and safety legislation. Let's say, for example, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, Helen, is if it was a requirement of health and safety that you had to wear visors or whatever, you're working in that kind of thing, not PPE kind of visors, I'm talking about like if you're working with drills and stuff.
Yeah.
If that employee is not choosing to wear goggles or the visor and something sort of splits off and does something to their eye, the employer's demonstrated that they did what they should do with everything. The employee it's their own fault, it's contributory because they've refused to do it. But there's a chain of causation that's not broken there. Is, did you get the injury because of that measure that was either not in place or you didn't take? You can't have that with COVID. At what point do you decide that the chain of causation was broken because they went for lunch with each other?
It's not.
You don't know what your employees are doing outside of the workplace. You don't know whether they're going and mixing with the families and having a massive party in the back garden or going to Bournemouth Beach. We don't know what they're doing outside of that, can we? So they can only you can try and limit the amount of people that come into the workplace. But some of the companies that I work with, and they're not in industries where you can work from home. Yeah. And the guidance right early on was saying, if one of the employees, for example, in a factory, test positive, does the factory then have to close? And the guidance said no, just make sure you're adhering to social distancing measures. So as long as the employers are doing that, then I can't see where the claims are going to come from unless they've just done absolutely bugger all to try and manage it.
I think that's an interesting point, though, because so essentially the message is that in terms of kind of law and the legal obligations, that framework is already there because it's already upon employers to make sure their employees are safe and at work. Would you say it would be a legal requirement now for employers going back to carry out a fresh risk assessment in light of COVID? Is that a requirement?
Yeah, because the government have said very clearly risk assess for COVID. So for example, if you got an employee who came to you and told you she was pregnant, you would be expected to risk assess for the fact that they were pregnant outside of your normal risk assessment that you should have done within your business. So where things change, you would have to risk assess, and that's general. And they should be displaying it as well and letting people know that they've done it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Actually, that's worth repeating, isn't it? That this it's all very well doing this stuff and carrying out your risk assessments, but you've got to make sure you are telling people and you've displayed the information for your employees to see. You know, they can get they can get access to it in their policy handbooks. You know, the public are aware that you're taking these measures, whether that be on the front of your shop or side or whatever. I think that's a key thing, isn't it? To not just take the measures, but make sure you're seen to be taking the correct measures as well. We've had a comment from Laura, hi Laura, who said that there's also huge policy considerations, and there are, I presume, in terms of then, because we were going to talk about this, we'll do it now, but in terms of kind of employee contracts and health and safety policies that companies have, do all of those things need reviewing in light of this, or just?
It would be sensible and good practice to do that, just in light of things changing and what we've had to go through, because the likelihood is that we're going to have to go through it again when there's an inevitable second peak. You know, things like, you know, we did everything really quickly, and I think, Hannah, you mentioned the job retention scheme earlier. That was all thrown together and everything went in really quickly. And things like home working, you know, businesses that would never even consider home working in normal circumstances or patterns, after I've sent all of their employees home with the computers under their arms, with no thought to GDPR, as Joanne's already said, about things like the paperwork that she has to deal with. So now that that's looking like it's going to be a more permanent thing, people should be going back and looking at, well, what provision have I got, what policies have I got in place to manage? How do I manage people's personal data at home? So for example, deal with multiple companies' employee data. I've got systems in place because I do that anyway. But if you've got a HR manager from an organisation suddenly working from home when she wouldn't normally do that, she's accessing systems and she's got disciplinary minutes on a desk at home with her kids wandering around doing homeschooling. All of those things, you know, have not been considered really, because everybody just assumed that in 3 months' time, when lockdown was over, we'd all go back to working and normal and we wouldn't need to worry about it. But there are obviously going to be people now going, well, I can do my job from home, so why wouldn't I want to do that forever? So we're going to see more flexible working requests going through. We're going to see people wanting to put things in contracts that aren't there now. So things like, I mean, I routinely, and it depends on the client, but routinely would ask them if they wanted a short working time clause in the contract, which would have facilitated furlough to some extent without agreement. So you will see lots of businesses wanting to put that in to be able to lay people off at short notice within the contracts where they haven't already got that. So we're going to be looking at changes to terms and conditions. People wanting people to work shorter hours or for less money. All of those things have got legal implications because the changes to terms and conditions. And some employees need to be kind of running roughshod over people saying, well, we've got to change everything now because of COVID, and not following proper full consultation processes to do so. So I think that's going to be a clear issue in terms of, I know you said, Hannah, about tribunals. There are going to be tribunals because people are trying to pull stuff through without following what would be the normal. I mean, for some bizarre reason, people think normal employment law has gone out the window.
Yeah. There's been lots of stuff in the news, isn't there? Like, a lot of employers are going to realise that the staff can actually work from home, and people are loving working from home, so they're going to sort of want to work from home and realise that they can. Yeah, that's because they haven't actually considered any of the policies. Before our girls even took a damn thing home from here, the work from home policy was redrafted to take that into account quite quickly. But people aren't doing it. Like you're right, they just took the computers under their arms and just sort of buggered off into the bright blue. And they quite like working from the garden, and don't realise for the employer the implications that no, you can't just because you can take your computer and you've got Wi-Fi.
Yeah, they were talking. I listened to, I don't know if anyone else listens to it. It's a podcast from the BBC, the Coronavirus Newscast. And I've been listening to that. It's a Monday to Friday thing. And they were talking about that, I think yesterday or the day before, about the changes and that Boris Johnson had said, essentially, you know, businesses will do the right thing. And, you know, we don't need to massively change the law or put any new things in place because businesses will know what to do. But as somebody, you know, one of the journalists on there was saying, well, you can't necessarily trust either businesses or employees to just be left to their own devices and everybody will do the best thing. You know, in an ideal world, obviously, everybody will have a nice conversation and sit down and reach something that they are both mutually happy with. But in the real world, there's going to be now employees that want to work from home because they've got childcare issues or caring responsibilities, which is fair enough. But you've also got employers that need people back in the office or the factory or whatever because they're trying to build the business up from 3 months of being on their arse. So there's those conflicting, and it's going to lead, like you say, Helen, to court cases, isn't it? It's inevitable.
Yeah, and I'm getting lots of conversations right now between employees saying, okay, well, I'm back open now, I want everybody back to work, but the schools aren't open, are they? So, how far do you push that? Because ultimately, if that's going to be a long-term thing, that's not a temporary thing, is it? It's not something that an employer can. So in the normal world, pre-COVID, if somebody was off long term because they weren't able to fulfil the contractual duties, you would have to deal with that. So at some point, there's going to be a step change where employers have to sit down and say, okay, well, I can't allow this any longer. I can't facilitate it any longer because it's having a detrimental impact on the business. So we're going to have to make some tough decisions. But where that's related to something like childcare workers, you're shielding, then you've got disability discrimination elements of it. You've got discrimination on the grounds of somebody having to stay at home and looking after the children because they've asserted a statutory right to do so. There are all sorts of elements. But actually, the tribunals are what they're clogged up with at the moment are claims about furlough, which you rightly said is not a thing. We're getting feedback from tribunal judges saying, well, all we're doing is looking at them and casting them out because it's not a legal concept.
I want to talk about that actually because this is what I know Helen and I have had a conversation like this, and Hannah and I have as part of the business, but the flexible furlough scheme, for fuck's sake, as it's now. Furlough is a perfect example of this because, as you say, it wasn't something that was in anybody's contract. It was an army term, I think, wasn't it? So it didn't even have a lot of basis in law. So they brought that in overnight, which was brilliant. It's enabled our business to stay open and lots of people to keep their jobs. I'm not knocking the scheme, but there was no guidance at the beginning, and then the guidance as they started kind of realizing situations, it started to change. And I mean, we, as from our personal point of view, we just made sure every decision we made, we had a paper trail for, and we had documented. So if anyone comes back, we can say, well, this was the rationale we went through at the time. But the government or HMRC or whatever have now put out so much money that they are going to have to try and, it's inevitable. They're going to start trying to claim that back. So is that going to be a massive legal and employment law issue that we have to face, do you think?
Well, I think they put something in place called the Treasury Directive, which they keep updating every time they change everything. And in some circumstances, that's contradicted the stuff that's been on the government website because we've gone through it and it's not the same, but it's still not within employment law. So I think all of these claims that are going in, so there's a fraud hotline, a HMRC fraud hotline specifically for furlough fraud. So where employers are, so we're hearing lots of kind of anecdotal stuff about employers claiming furlough and not paying it to the staff.
No.
I'll tell you, loads of them kind of saying, well, it's not come through. Employers are just saying it's not come through yet, or employers trying to use the money to fund redundancies, which clearly isn't what it's for. So I think it's more of a, that's a kind of it's going to be a HMRC investigation element of it rather than it being employment law, because I think the tribunals are reluctant to kind of accept it as anything other than what it is, which is a temporary measure to address a temporary situation.
I mean, obviously, am I right in saying, sorry, I think we've got a bit of a lag. Joanne, am I right in saying that you can't take action against someone for something that was done retrospectively? So, or like, you can't take retrospective action. So, like, if you change your policy and then the staff have contravened the policy or contravened the law or whatever before the new guidance was released, can any action be taken against them now? Am I being really inarticulate? No.
I know. Yeah, I know what you mean, but I don't think you worded it. So basically, they couldn't, if we changed the policy, say as of the 6th of July, they couldn't then, that doesn't retrospectively apply. So the rule was one rule up until the 6th of July. We can't say, we've changed the policy now and it applies. You
can't apply a new rule retrospectively, can you? Like, you can't say, you would.
The language that normal people would use to explain this.
I think Helen's probably better to answer that one.
Yeah. If you're talking about policy from an employment point of view, you would normally say it's from now on. You wouldn't go back and say, well, I've changed my disciplinary policy and now that's a problem, and you did that 6 months ago, so I'm going to discipline you for it. you wouldn't have a leg to stand on if that went to a tribunal, really, because the employees can only work with what they know to be the case at the time, can't they?
And what about
that would go out to other areas of law as well. So and particularly I think that's relevant, particularly within some of the HMRC stuff that's come out, because they've changed it, and it's been clearly dated. When you look at the government website, there's dates for when everything's been changed. So if you can demonstrate that you were adhering to what the government had said at the time that they said it, and when you made those decisions, I think they would struggle to kind of pin anything on you to say, well, yeah, but we changed it 2 months later, and tough.
That's what I was getting at. Thanks. Sorry, it's Friday.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. If I just bring this back to the kind of advice that employers need to follow, it is that, you know, if you were making decisions, you first of all need to be able to document that and show your workings out and say this is the rationale that we made it. Make sure you've got notifications from employer to employee and they have acknowledged that they've received it. But also, if you can, pin that to whatever advice you were following at the time. So, you know, copy and paste it into your email from the government website or whatever, just to show that was the advice you were following at the time. I mean, still, it's always been nebulous, hasn't it? I mean, we were confused at certain points about certain things. Like, for example, were staff that were on furlough, were they allowed to go networking for the company? Were they allowed to carry out work? Because the rule said at the beginning they're not allowed to do anything that made the business money. So we were like, well, does that mean they can do volunteer work? Does that mean they can do the odd thing if it's not directly for a client that you? And in the end, we've just said, like, no, that, you know, they're on furlough, they're doing nothing, just to be on the safe side. But there's going to be times, there's going to be businesses that have walked that line, aren't there? There's bound to be.
Sorry.
Oh.
I've got clients of mine that have worked, they've not only walked the line, they've crossed it. I've had a conversation with a member of staff asking for advice, and then she told me that she was on furlough leave, and it's like, well, why are you working? Yeah. Because he's told me that I've got to. So I think in terms of the furlough in itself not being a legal concept, there may well be claims that have come around that. So, for example, if you're only being paid 80%, but you're being asked to work, and that's potentially an unlawful deduction from earnings, isn't it? So there are other kind of knock-on effects of it, where people might be able to make claims under existing employment law that are related to furlough and related to some of the stuff that we've had to do. So that I wouldn't rule that out entirely.
Yeah, there's them, like I said, there's them grey areas that came in as well. Yeah. Where they weren't doing the normal job, that they're doing other bits, and it's how far is that voluntary or generating, fees or whatever. And even for the directors, I mean, I assume the idea behind the whole furlough thing from the government was not to punish employers for keeping staff on board, but then you've got to say reasonably. There's certain things that you need help keeping the company tick over, so it is a company at the end. And saying to employees they can't do nothing at all, well, you're just asking for people to say, well, I've got no choice but to make those redundancies. And then the guidance for directors was even more difficult. And I think that one thing that's coming out of here is it's not enough. An employer has to do something, no matter whether it's doing your policies, changing them, making adjustments for working with, social distancing and all that kind of stuff, or whatever you do with your staff is. The key thing is, and I think Helen might agree with me here, is don't do nothing. It's bloody confusing. But I think you need to demonstrate you've tried to do something. Because try to understand these. I mean, in general, before COVID hit, generally being a director, I'm very qualified in what I do. I'm very good at being a solicitor, and my specialism marketing, HR, accounting, all the things that come with being a director. I don't have the requisite staff or qualifications as I do in my own professional expertise to do. So then trying to navigate this lot on top of it is really, really difficult. So especially when it's kind of like saying, I need to get, the government said, you need to get all those shelves up. Get them all up. I want them neat, put up 5 shelves in a row, and then they don't give you a hammer and nail and say,
shelf.
And then bollock you afterwards.
Yeah.
Or it feels at the moment with it.
It is exactly like that, because like you say, in order to keep our businesses going and to make sure we have got businesses that are able to employ those staff and take them all back on at the end of this, which is the ultimate goal, isn't it? We need to be able to keep the business going. And there are fundamental skills that we have lost through our business. And I mean, the ironic thing is that what we've had to do is some certain things that we need doing, we've had to outsource it because we can't ask our own staff to do it. So we've had to, you know, hire an hour of outsourcing here or there, which just, again, it just seems like this is yeah, which we're supposed to be keeping our own staff employed. But, you know, that, like you say, that's the way we ought to work. I want us to move on because we have talked about furlough quite a lot. So thank you for that. But Jo, we've talked about now then some of the challenges that businesses are facing. If you were to kind of point a business in the right direction of where they need to go now, where would you be sending them? So I know I always ask a question about apps and resources, books, you know, any websites, anything like that. Are there anybody that you think businesses should be talking to at this point? Should they be seeking the advice? So Helen, I'll come to you first. What do you think?
Me, obviously. I wouldn't want to say me, aren't I? Please to go and speak to me. We've got a fantastic resource on our website that's got loads of free information on it. So even if you're not one of our clients, you can access kind of frequently asked questions about flexible furlough scheme that's coming in from the 1st of July.
Can I recommend that actually, Helen, because your face-to-face HR website does have some amazing resources on it, and also your email newsletter has been remarkably helpful. I've been forwarding that to Hannah, and we've used quite a lot of the information that has. So yeah, anyone, even if they're not a customer, can sign up to receive that.
Absolutely, and we've sent out loads of free stuff as well. And because I've had, as you can imagine, I've had lots of ad hoc people who wouldn't normally deal with asking me for information. So I've been able to send out kind of free stuff to them and just give them the top line stuff that they need to get through it. But yeah, I would say get yourself a health and safety consultant as well who can help you with risk assessments. I think that's probably key to most businesses, because it's not you just work in a cafe and you kind of, you know, that you've got a hot kettle to deal with. That's probably the limit of what a small cafe would do. But if you're now talking about putting screens up and making sure people come in one way and go out one way, that's an entirely different kettle of fish, isn't it? So health and safety reps, but yeah, I mean, there's loads of resources. I mean, I've dipped into resources like there's a guy called Daniel Barnett, who's an employment law solicitor, who does a great kind of employment law email service. It sends out loads of HR professionals, and I even know other employment law solicitors who are on the list of people that he'd be sent it out to, and he does loads of webinars and stuff as well. And he's pretty quick and hot on the changes really. So that's a good one to be on. CIPD, obviously my network, I've got some great free stuff as well there. So there's loads of results out there. Webinars like this are great as well.
Brilliant. Hannah, what about you?
Our accountant has been an invaluable source of information and support for us. We have used our HR advisor, but our accountant is, she's sorted out all the furlough payments, and she's just been amazing. And the grants and, Sybil's advice and things like that. So yeah, get yourself a decent accountant if you haven't got one. And they're not expensive usually, they are worth their weight in gold. And like Joanne says, you're in business because you're good at the business, not because you're good at business. So get yourself an accountant. Yeah.
Joanne, what about you?
Same. I would say the three people that we've relied on the most throughout this are going to be like Helen, HR, to make sure that that's working. The accountant, Hannah's absolutely right. If you're not in contact with your accountant at all, you want to speak to someone to you've got tax returns, and get a different accountant.
Yeah.
I mean, especially helping you through the HMRC part of it and the furlough scheme, you've got to have them two hand in hand. So having an accountant that helps you with that is invaluable. But also keep track of the regulator as well, because I know not everybody is, but we have the extra added thing of compliance. So there's certain things, whilst we could have the right policy for working from home, we can have the accountant telling us about furlough, our regulator says, you ain't taking that stuff home because it breaches regulations. Like FCA, we're regulated by the SRA, this is regulatory authority. And them three are your key. I mean, to be fair, you should work in compliance the entire time. Maybe it'll give people the arse really with stuff. But yeah, definitely, if you're not in regular contact with HR or your accountant, then get different ones.
Yeah, for sure.
I think as well, I mean, I've talked about networking before. You know, I am a member of quite a few networking groups, and I know all of you are go networking, but that's been an invaluable source of information, because like you say, if anything that we've needed or we've not been sure about, we've been able to just go there and say, does anyone know something, or does anyone know who might be able to help me with such and such a thing? And they just are able to point you in the right direction. So I mean, for me as well, with the Bake Up Business Association, if you in your local area where your business is, if there is a business association, then get in touch with them, because they're often the middleman as well between the council and local businesses, so they can put you in touch with people who can find out things. You know, if you're not sure about, one of the queries we had at the local Bake Up Business Association meeting was that it's all very well for businesses who have a premises and they put their 2-meter rules in the shop, but what are they going to do with people if they're queuing outside of the shop? Whose responsibility is that? If people are on the pavement, if people are coming into the road, if they're blocking traffic. So, you know, all of those sorts of issues, either your local council or your local business association will be able to help with. But also, it's just that it's been a massive help to us, I think, feeling connected and being able to have chats with other business owners and say, you know, I'm not sure about this. Or even like with the furlough scheme, we were like, what are we supposed to do? Are we doing the right thing? And then we spoke to everyone else, and everyone else said, I haven't got a fucking clue what we're supposed to be doing. I don't know either. And that in itself was a massive help, because we were like, it's just being fake.
Yeah, definitely.
And in terms of webinars, as Helen said, you know, there are so many webinars, but there are an awful lot of free webinars. There's things like Boost Lancashire. I think in Yorkshire you have a similar thing, don't you, Hannah? Boost Lancashire.
Sure we do.
Yeah. So you're obviously in touch with it. But also your Chamber of Commerce, you know, most chambers of commerce at the moment are offering free webinars. They've taken away the qualifying things for businesses, so you can often access support that previously you had to have like been this for 3 years or whatever. So find out about it and speak to your accountant, your HR provider, your solicitor, and find out about those things. So thank you for that. We are coming up to time. If anyone if anyone has any questions and would like to pose a question, put it now. But in terms of the kind of top tips that you would give to businesses, if you were advising them now on what the legal situation is now and what the legal situation might be, what advice would you give? So Joanne, what would your advice be?
I agree with everything you just said about getting a network around you, because it's so lonely being a business owner and a director and doing things you're not qualified to do. Is having that hub around you of people you could just turn to is my absolutely top tip, because they'll keep you abreast. Somebody within that will be specialist in something that the government are going to put out in the next set of guidelines or the next rule change. Surround yourself with those kind of people who are quite happy to share that with their network.
Yeah, I also, just to add to that, we talked about email newsletters before, but most businesses do have some sort of email newsletter, especially if they are, you know, like a HR provider or an accountant or something, or they'll just forward information that they get from HMRC or whatever. So sign up to people's email newsletters. That's a really good tip, because they'll, you know, you start getting the information that comes in. If it's not relevant to you, you can just delete it. It's not the end of the world, but it's better to have that information coming rather than going out and seek it. So yeah, that's good. Hannah, what would your advice be?
I think it's so easy to get to put all, you know, rewriting your policies and risk assessing and stuff. It's so easy to put it off in favour of doing your day-to-day job and thinking, oh, I'm busy, I'll do it later. But don't bury your head in the sand with it. Actually take half a day and write your policies, review your risk assessments, check that your employment contracts, you know, still kind of hold water, that your staff are happy and everything. Because like the consequences of not doing it are far greater than the consequences of a little bit of work being a little bit late for a client, or, you know, your to-do list piling up a little bit higher. So yeah, don't bury your head in the sand, get it done. And if you can't do it, outsource it and pay someone to do it for you.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you. Helen, what would you say?
Similar to Hannah, really, I would say, obviously, reviewing everything that you've got in place is really key. But on the back of that, there's no point reviewing it and not telling anybody that you've reviewed it. So talk to your staff. If you're going to make changes to your company handbooks, to your policies, there's no point changing it if the employees don't know that you changed it. So the really key point about everything really is talk to your employees, consult with them, inform them. Employment law has not gone out the window, so any decisions you're making still need to be compliant with all of those things. And if you don't know, take advice.
I think that's the key thing here, isn't it, actually? Because, a lot of people it's confusing. It's a confusing situation. And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know what we should be doing. But the key thing is actually, yes, all right, furlough's new and this situation is new. It's unique. None of us have been in it. But UK British law actually already supports most of these things in some way. There's already some sort of legislation there to provide a guidance and a framework for this. So, there's nothing new under the sun, is there? Basically, as we've said, speak to a lawyer. But the general rule is, if you can show your workings out, if you can say, this is the decision that we made at this time, this was the rationale, this was the advice we were following, you're probably going to be all right. There's going to be claims, there's going to be all sorts of people taking people to court and people trying to get money back. That's inevitable. But just make sure you followed that process and you're sticking to UK law as it is now. Yeah. Okay. We're running out of time, so I just want to say thank you so much to all of you. That's it. I love law, actually. I did a GCSE in law. But I know for most people, it's one of those ones where they go, oh, God's sake, no. But I think you're right. If you're in business, it needs to be something that you pay attention to. So thank you. Does anyone have any final thoughts they would like to say? No? What's everyone doing this weekend? Cocktails in the garden? Yeah. I think the sun might shine this weekend, so I'm definitely on for a porn star martini in the garden. That'll be me. Thank you so much to all of you. Helen from Face to Face HR, Joanne from Berry Solicitor, and Hannah Weinhold from GrowTraffic. Please, will all of you go and put your contact details in the comments box. I'm afraid we've had nobody doing the comments for GrowTraffic today. So the comments box looks a little bit sparse, more sparse than it normally does. But please put your contact details in. If anybody wants to get in touch, they'll contact you and do that. So thank you so much, all of you, for your time. Have a lovely weekend, whatever you're doing.